Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today I am joined by another repeat guest, Josh Grandinetti. Josh is a retired firefighter captain after 15 years on the job, and he medically retired in the last, 4 months now?
Yeah, about 4 months, I guess, at this
About 4
point. Yeah,
months, yeah.
officially. Mm-hmm.
And he has transferred over to a full-time paramedic with the Mesa Fire Department in Arizona there. He is the founder/creator of Foundation Fortified, which is a mindfulness meditation platform specifically designed for the first responder population. He is a qualified mindfulness meditation instructor. He is also he's the one who introduced me to the Thin Line Rock Station, where he is another DJ and host, where he hosts the show Midweek Mindfulness every Wednesday, 12 to 2 p.m. He is, I would like to say, an all-round good bloke, and has over the last sort of 12 months become probably one of my closest friends, if I'm allowed to say that, Josh.
Absolutely. I appreciate the compliment. I feel the same about it's nice to have somebody in the space that I can just call personally and not feel too embarrassed about when I don't understand something.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's quite a symbiotic friendship in that means. Well, thank you for coming back. If this is the first time you are listening, Josh was a guest on I wrote it down, episode 36. So that was kind of in the lead up to that. Him and I met and we discussed Josh's career and Foundation Fortified and so many things. And we actually talked for like 2.5 hours. So if you would like to know a little bit more about that, please feel free to jump back into the back catalogue and episode 36 and check out a bit of the history of Josh and all things Foundation Fortified. But today Josh and I probably talk every week, maybe
At least once a week. I feel like sometimes I don't get around to talking to you for like 2 or 3 weeks, but I would say on average we're probably talking at least once a week together.
And then it's like, where have you been all my life?
At a time. Yeah,
exactly. And so after we connected for the podcast last year, and it was about this time last year, I think, Josh kindly put me in contact with the bosses of the Thin Line Rock Station, which led to me getting my own show on there. So I'm always eternally grateful to Josh and always have a debt of gratitude and all the time in the world for him. But so recently, Josh released a mindfulness meditation, just kind of like a short 5-minute one on Instagram a couple of weeks ago. And I absolutely adored it. And I just felt like it was a reason for us to jump back on and have a conversation about a couple of different bits and pieces and kind of talk specifically about that meditation too, and the inspiration behind it and all that kind of thing. So do you want to talk to me a little bit about that one, Josh?
Yeah, that's great. Like we talked in our first podcast, I started Foundation Fortified because I started practicing meditation almost maybe 12 years ago at this point. And I just believed it was very helpful in my career with the post-traumatic stress, the anxiety I was developing, and even in my personal life, it seemed to be a gift to my loved ones. I was less worked up at home, and I was a little bit more patient with my boys and my wife, and it just seemed to do so much good for me. And I wanted to find a way to bring it into the fire service and into the first responder world in general. And so I took that opportunity when I got injured at work, and I was out of the fire department for 1.5 years trying to recover from my busted knee. But that's what built Foundation Fortified, was just everything that I thought was relatable and valuable to first responders, and trying to put it through a mindfulness meditation lens. Mm-hmm. Well, now that I'm back acting as a first responder, if not a sworn fire captain, but as a transport paramedic with, like you said, Mesa Fire, it's just put me back into the role of being a first responder again, and being away from my family for extended periods of time, and going through some of the difficulties and even just small day-to-day struggles. A lot of my content in Foundation Fortified early on was about the big, hard, heavy hitting things in our careers, in our industry. But there's all these subtle nuances that I'm starting to get familiar with again, starting to find touch with again, and getting off duty and actually leaving the responder behind and becoming the civilian and the father and the friend was something that I hadn't done in a while. So I just
Yeah.
wrote a meditation that I thought would be very, relatable to first responders who are trying to decompress, come off the clock, and be with their family, so that they aren't
Mhm.
having those holdovers of the mind, or that hypervigilance that's constantly bothering us when we're away from work. So that whole piece was just kind of, it was very beneficial to be back in the life of a first responder. And it just occurred to me that this was something that not only have I struggled with in the past, but I've obviously struggled with a little bit again as I've come back into the firehouse. And
Mhm.
I just thought this would be a really good piece to put out for first responders. So
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I think as soon as you posted it, I think I texted you and was like, dude, it was such a powerful one that you were kind enough just to kind of put out there and share, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so when we spoke sort of that 12 months ago, I think, Foundation Fortified was sort of almost just like a little bit more of like a landing page, and you were sort of working a lot behind the scenes to develop the website into what it is today, which is something that has incredible content, and you have like a do you call it, like people can sign up and become a member, and there's a like a free side, and then there's a subscription side which has obviously more detailed and more like in-depth practices and stuff like that for people who are into it. But you equally share so much beautiful content just to kind of be the good bloke that you are in terms of just wanting to kind of help people, which and I think that's why, like, and I've obviously done a lot of the work and the meditations on your site, the one that you shared, it was just so powerful, and I'm like, we have to talk about this.
I'm glad you find it useful. I am not interested in putting everything that I create. I didn't invent meditation. I didn't invent my mindfulness. And
Yeah.
what's more is I don't feel like I'm the world's best meditation you know instructor or practitioner. I'm just a regular first responder, and I'm just a regular man like the rest of us. And I just believe in the practice. I just believe that there are so many correlations between what we do on duty and what mindfulness meditation circles would teach if you could just
Mm-hmm.
tweeze apart some of the strangeness that is stuck there with Eastern religion and things like that. If you could just tease some of that apart, there's
Yeah.
a baby in the bathwater here that's worth saving. But
Yeah.
now that I'm back in the role of a first responder, and kind of on a more normal schedule with everything, I plan on just doing more and more meditations and putting them out like the one I just did.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in putting everything behind a paywall for people. I legitimately feel like this is a practice that our industry should embrace, given its preventative measures, its low cost, and the obvious good that it does for people.
Yeah.
Like we said 12 months ago, it's very hard to find every first responder a therapist for 150 an hour and medication. And what's more is that's a reactive measure. Once you've gotten the mental health disease,
Mm-hmm.
so much of us wait for time and experience to not only make us the first responders we want to be, but also to derange our minds. You kind of trade one for the other. You get
Yeah.
experience in derangement, but there is a way to cultivate all of the benefits of a strong, present first responder on scene,
Yeah.
and also a strong, present first responder or family member or friend or father. You can cultivate all of this through a few minutes a day of just paying close attention to your mind. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to do, is just change the narrative and bring it to first responders in any way that I can. So I've always appreciated the fact that you've been such a dedicated fan, Erin.
I am, darling. I am. No, I mean, first of all, like, I think it speaks to who you are, about the fact that you're like not just kind of in it to to make a buck, and like you said, like squirrel everything away behind a paywall. The whole point is you wanting to help people, and obviously the things like, with the subscription are like a lot more detailed, and it's a lot of time and effort that you put into to writing like the more extensive practices and meditation. So it makes sense that there would be a fee involved in something like that, because that's for people who really want to sort of delve into it, and essentially it's like they're kind of paying you to be like their private meditation mindfulness meditation instructor. But I think as well, what speaks to me too is the fact that, like you're saying, we can engage in all of the things that happen after we've, our bodies have experienced that stress, or like that, the chronic stress that we do with first responder careers. But I think also what your practice speaks to is strengthening the mind in the way that, and something that people listening I harp on about all the time, about being like proactive and preventative. And I know sort of a bit like of a goal of yours is not for someone to, or I guess it's twofold, in terms of you want it to be a resource for people if they do feel like they're kind of perhaps going down that path, or they find themselves further along that path, and this is something that speaks to them, to help them where they're at, but also to be that proactive and preventative practice that will build them up from the get-go. And even, I think we've discussed it, like, in offline conversations about getting it into the, like probationary structure of fire departments or police academies and all that kind of thing, to have as a resource from the very, very, very beginning of their careers.
Absolutely. I see it in the same way as I see the way first responders have done a 180 on physical fitness as our culture. I mean, it wasn't too long in the distant past where firefighters and cops weren't really involved with physical exercise all that much. It was just the job, really, And then we noticed that cops and firefighters and some paramedics were just dying on scene of heart disease right there in front of us, and we realized we had to do something. We had to do something for the first responders. We had to do something for the public that was on scene at that incident, that now every first responder is just going to be managing this gentleman, right? Instead of the emergency going on. And at the end of the day, we want to keep our first responders healthy. It's expensive to lose us, right? So
exactly,
embracing a culture of first response or physical fitness was a very beneficial thing for us to do. And we did it by putting that culture into our academies. And while we have you for these 2-3 months, we're going to make you run. We're going to make you do push-ups. We're going to make you do a little bit of stair towers, while you're running up and down. We're going to teach you a little bit about diet and exercise, and hope that some of that sticks with you throughout your career. And you could always come back to it if you feel like, your fitness level isn't to par of what you want out of your life and career. And I just feel like that's the same thing we can do with the basic practice of mindfulness meditation, because we can't give everybody a therapist. We can't identify risk factors for mental health disease right away. And what's more, even if you're the perfect mental health candidate on day one when you're 18 years old, this is the one career we just know we're going to put you in front of things that you would never anticipate being able to see or cope with. We know this is going to happen. So we should be doing something mild, something meek to influence the mental health of our first responders as we're hiring them on, not only as department captains and in management, but also as citizens. We should be interested in the mental health of the people that are coming to help us with our biggest emergencies. And mindfulness and meditation is a very simple and elegant way to get 40 recruits to sit down once a day for 10 minutes and study their own mind, and to look within to see, do I show up more often day to day feeling depressed, excited, overwhelmed, anxious? How am I sitting most often, and what am I experiencing? And that's going to give you a good indication of how you're developing and the kind of person you're becoming. And what's more is mindfulness meditation can help reverse some of the negative things that we don't want in our lives. And so this is all the reasons why I believe meditation is kind of the missing key. And it's the most important thing we can do in first responder world to influence our biggest threat right now, which is the mental health epidemic that's really affecting a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like you're saying, if nothing else, it's kind of also about prolonging their careers, because if this is an area that they love and they want to remain in, giving them the tools to help themselves along the way also makes it so, I think in almost every first responder role at the moment, like retention is a significant issue. So giving them tools that they can, granted, like take it or leave it depending on what works for them. But if this is one that they can kind of implement from the get-go, then they don't know any different. And then they have that capability, like that self-efficacy and personal agency to take control of their own, physical and emotional and psychological well-being throughout, like doing the kind of practice that Foundation Fortified offers them to help them, perhaps have a longer career than they may have had if they never entertained like the idea of mindfulness meditation at all.
Absolutely. I mean, we all want longevity out of our careers for the most part. Most first responders, once you get over the hump of the training and even before that, most of us we didn't come into this industry not wanting to do this job, But sadly, the job has a way of beating that desire to love your community and to care for your community and do the right thing and be the great citizen that you are, all those things that we want out of our lives as people and in our careers as responders, it can get beat out of us by the very job that we're doing. And mindfulness meditation is just a really good way to kind of investigate the causes of that, re-engage with your compassion circuits instead of your empathy circuits. And I'm very against empathy as something that we should be teaching anyway, because empathy it's a finite resource. And what's more is it's one that affects you, the responder, in time. But if you institute a culture of compassion, rather, compassion is just the desire to alleviate the suffering of somebody else. But there's no need to exchange feelings with that person, right? There's no need to feel the intensity of the emotional pull that they are in their own experience. But we can have compassion and want to alleviate that suffering. And I feel like that's another tool, another benefit of mindfulness as a scope, is it just seems to have overall better teachings than some of the ones that kind of overall affect us in the long run. There's a time and place to be empathetic, and there's a time and a place to be, extremely heroic. But we all know that sometimes on scene, doing the heroic thing is only going to cost you or your department more casualties, right? So when do you be a hero, and when do you wait? That's also something we train through in first responder, and there's all these different platitudes that mindfulness meditation can kind of help us learn and engage with, and kind of begin to develop a new way of seeing the world, a new way, a new experience that we can kind of add on to our lives so that we can be better responders and better people in general. So
yeah, it's funny you just like start talking about compassion, because I literally talked about it on my show on the radio last week and about how compassion can show up in our roles as first responders. And I think I did like six different sort of little like avenues as to where it can show up. And you've really just given me something to think about, because when you were like, I'm a little against empathy, I'm like, my heart sort of was like, you fucking struck me in the heart with a dagger. But explaining it just made total sense to me, because I lean into my empathy a lot, obviously now, given the work that I do, but it's also because it helps inform me, or helps me help the people that I want to help in the right capacity. Whereas I think that delineation between, like you're saying, like I need to deeply understand your perspective as my client, or as like your future counseling client, in order to help you traverse that. Whereas as first responders, we don't have that sort of long, drawn out experience with people. Sometimes it's kind of short, very dynamic, often laced with carnage or tragedy or whatever else. But that's actually a really interesting way to frame it, in terms of like, you're like, I can offer you compassion, and that involves sympathy and occasionally empathy, but essentially it's recognizing other people's suffering, but also having the motivation to do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, empathy costs us. It does.
Yeah.
I'm very empathetic toward my children, and they're exhausting. You know what I mean? It's exhausting. And don't get me wrong, empathy definitely has its place. It's a very motivating, when you're feeling empathetic towards someone's situation, this is what will bring you up and get you to do the thing that needs to be done. But compassion, on the other hand, is just a state of mind. It's an overall state of caring for another person, of wanting to do the right thing. It's much more durable in our psyche than empathy. Empathy might get you an hour, a day of effort before it starts to cost you and make your own stress levels, cortisol levels, exhaustion levels go through the roof. And this is partly why it doesn't take long in our careers as first responders before we start defending our own psyches against the community that we're sworn to protect. It doesn't take long before we start getting a little soured toward demographics that cause us issues, like the drug users, or the alcoholics, or the ones, the parts of our societies that we're constantly running on. We tend to get defensive and a little frustrated with them as people, right? As individuals we have to deal with day to day. But empathy will kind of drive you to have those defense mechanisms because you're feeling the cost of their situation. You're feeling bad for their circumstance. And that will make us naturally be more defensive. Whereas compassion, it's all too easy to be compassionate against somebody who's struggling with drug addiction, who's struggling with, not being able to get through their own struggles in life, whether it's alcoholism or whatever it might be. That's a very compassionate thing. And all I have to do is be kind to this individual from here to the hospital and show them a little bit of dignity and respect. And that's it. And that's a lot easier than wanting them to change who they are, being frustrated that they can't change who they are, because I'm feeling those empathetic circles of what my life would be like if I was you. Yeah. Right. So it's a subtle difference, but it is a subtle difference that can make all the difference in a 20-year career.
No, very much. No, this is why we're friends. I've learned so much from you, darling. No, but it is because I literally, before you sort of like explained it just in that way, I would have probably argued with you on that point. But I think you're right, because as well, like I have to have a comprehension of your experience, your pain, your whatever it is, to be able to offer you that empathy. And as someone who is a naturally very empathetic person, I don't know why, and I don't know whether it is my policing background. I am able to disconnect very easily. Like I can offer it, but I don't let it necessarily like impact me. And whether that is from my policing career or working on like the suicide crisis line or that kind of thing, I think it's just the fact that I've had so much practice being able to not desensitize, but have just like a little bit of like, I don't know, visible shield or something like that. But that subtle delineation of what you've said in terms of empathy and compassion, I really like that. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that.
No problem.
I might have to change your nickname to Yoda or something now.
Yoda. Well, at first, I remember in my own mindfulness journey, I would have probably told somebody, if I was being very honest around a campfire 8 years ago, that I was kind of an angry individual. I was quick to anger, quick to frustration. My kids could recognize it in me. My wife could, my crew could. And I would have probably described myself as kind of an angry person. Someone can get heated very quickly. And then I began meditating. I was already probably about 2 or 3 years into my meditation practice at the time. But, I sat down to be mindful, and I slowly began to realize that it wasn't anger necessarily. I was just a very anxious person. I was always anxious, constantly anxious about something. And that anxiety, instead of it, showing up like sadness, or instead of it showing up, it showed up like anger and frustration. Yeah. And so,
which is incredibly common manifestation for, especially for guys.
Absolutely. And all my energy was being wasted into focusing on anger, when a little bit of self-compassion for this little anxious person who's really just afraid of whatever mental crap I was inventing for myself, or afraid of whatever it might have, started to have a little bit of compassion for that side of me. And compassion killed it a lot faster than arm wrestling it to the ground because I was angry, So that's just, the subtleties of the mind and the subtleties in the way that you frame your situation, and just at the end of the day, sitting with your mind can begin to reveal with you more about what its fundamental components are, rather than the emotional hues that we get in the moment and we just respond and we just react, right?
Yeah.
When you're sitting with the privacy of your own mind for 5, 10, 20 minutes, however long it ends up being, you might be able to get into the undercurrent just a little bit more, dip down below the surface and see what really is underpinning these responses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sort of we both can probably speak to the power of practicing self-compassion. Like, I think we might do it in slightly different ways, but I mean, I know for me, I probably discovered it a few years ago, like when my kids were a little bit younger, like probably even like before I went down the coaching path or anything like that. And whether you are a first responder, whether you are a young parent, or a parent with young children, being overwhelmed by a lot of things, I think, is really common in both domains. And being able to stop for a minute, whether you have lost your temper, whether you just feeling in complete and utter overwhelm and don't know what to do with yourself, being able to just kind of stop for a minute and take a breath and just kind of have that acknowledgement of okay, I'm finding this really challenging right now, and that's okay. And everyone has challenging moments that they go through, and I'm just going to take a beat and I'm going to accept that this is how it is right now. And I'm going to offer myself the grace that I would offer someone else if they were experiencing or feeling how I'm feeling right now. And there's it's so simple, but it's so powerful when you actually do it for yourself.
My dad used to tell me something you just said there. My dad used to tell me growing up all the time that common sense was learning from your mistakes, and wisdom is the ability to learn from other people's mistakes.
Ooh.
And I always thought that it's such an elegant way of putting it. It's like there are all these ways in which you develop common sense, you develop an understanding, but the really wise among us are the ones that can look across the table and see somebody get that DUI and realize, okay, I'm not going to make that mistake in my life. Just learning from the mistakes of others is one of the best ways to kind of catapult yourself forward in the world. You know what I mean? When people start to learn from the decisions of others,
Yeah. Wise words from Papa Grandinetti there.
Papa Grandinetti. I've got a million of them from that guy.
Well, I have none, so feel free to share them all the time.
I'll share them all.
But I guess as well, so you have, I mean, I feel like you are like almost like a professional podcast guest by now. You are just so kindly go around and share your story, share your experience, share your practices and resources and all that kind of thing, which I think is fantastic, because the more people that message gets out to, the better. But you were really open about the fact that you were, medically injured or off on medical injury leave. And then since we talked and became friends, you went through the process of, retiring from Eloy Fire Department and then transitioning over as a paramedic role now. Talk to me you sort of said writing the meditation was incredibly helpful in that respect. But I guess in terms of just like a very personal sense, did it feel like kind of riding a bike, getting back into those 24-hour shifts? Or are you just like, I feel really old and I haven't done this in a really long time?
I would put that at 50. I would put 50% of that on one side of that and 50% on the other. I felt like a decommissioned government resource after, 18 months of not sleeping in my own bed, 18 months of sleeping in my own bed, 18 months of being home with my wife and kids.
Oh my God. I bet your wife was so sick of you being around. I'll bet. She was like, go to work.
The funniest moment for me was when I was fresh on into my injury, about 3 months. So I was still very much in a chair, not really walking much or anything. I began to notice a little bit of impatience coming from my boys. They were kind of like
you bro, again?
We want our mom time and you're just cramping our style. It's time for you to. Aww. So I definitely went through the moment of going back to work and, my sleep schedule being disturbed again, almost like it was in the very beginning of my career. I remember when I was a brand new firefighter, I had gone through 19 straight years of sleeping as much as I wanted between the hours of 9 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
And then when I first became a firefighter, that was just getting interrupted, and I remember being just dog tired a month into that project and just not knowing if I can continue. And then finally, I just kind of started to adjust whether those adjustments in my brain were good and they're gonna cause me problems in the future or not. At least now I'm not so tired. So I definitely had some of that. I was coming home, I was a little more grumpy. I was realizing that I was a little sleepy and stuff like that. But again, just use my mindfulness practice to the best of my ability. And I've found that adjustment, and it is nice. It's nice to go to work. It's nice to be productive. It is, at the end of the day, just fulfilling for me to serve something, anything. It feels good to go to a city and be needed. There's so many human beings that don't really know what their job is, what their job's doing, who they're directly influencing. Yeah. And there's no part of that career, that feeling for a first responder. We can all get the sense that our small role is pointless given the large amount of catastrophe that's going on. But you do know you do know you're doing something, whether or not it's ultimately beneficial. We do know when we influence this community member or we serve this community, we're doing something that's respected and important.
Yeah.
And that's good for me. I've always enjoyed that sense, coming from the fire department, being a paramedic. So that's nice as well. But I don't really see any downside to going back to work in the fire department, to work as a paramedic. My knee bothers me from time to time. The knee starts to irritate me after about the 10th call of the day. But that's going to be no matter what I do, given the nature of the injury and how far I've come. I'm very fortunate to have gotten the surgeons that I did. But there's always going to be a little bit of a hiccup there. But I'm a fortunate guy, and I'm enjoying the new role. So.
Oh, that's good. I'm so happy to hear it. And now I do need you to explain the Doff the Clock, which is the name of the meditation which sparked our whole conversation today. Why don't you just take it away? Because I literally, he spent about 5 minutes offline trying to explain this to me. So I'm just going to let you run with it so I don't stuff it up.
So Erin didn't understand why it was called Doff the Clock, right? And if you're not familiar with firefighter lingo, instead of saying, we're going to put our turnout gear on and then take it off, we feel like we have to add a D to it. And so we don our gear and we doff our gear. I don't know why that is.
I mean, is that just an Arizonan thing?
Oh no, that's a firefighter, you don your gear and you doff your gear when you put it on and off.
See, I'm gonna have to ask. I'm gonna have to ask my husband because
you're gonna have to.
I'm normally pretty good with the firefighter lingo.
Oh, yeah.
I have a bit of an inside track. So, but that one I had not heard of before. So, again, Joshy teaching me stuff left, right, and center.
So I titled it. It's just a 5-minute meditation. Nothing crazy. And I titled it "Doff the Clock" to kind of just you're taking off the uniform and the duty of being a first responder. And so many of us struggle to go from the two different lifestyles after a little while. When you're young in your career, it's like you always want to be seen maybe as that first responder, or you want to be rid of it as soon as you can, regardless of the type of person you are. At some point, those lines get more and more blurry. The more roles, responsibilities you take on within the industry, the more traumatic experiences you start to have, those lines just get more and more blurry because the mind, very easy to understand, is just integrating your experiences. Yeah. It's just integrating, your mind doesn't know the difference when your husband is just being a father or he's now a firefighter. His personality isn't changing, and those experiences, in the hippocampus when you're going to sleep at night are integrating in a way that, regardless of whether or not you see yourself as two different people, you are just a single entity, and so it can just be very hard to come off the clock for us as first responders. Yeah. So that meditation practice is just completely designed to help you sit down in the comfort of your own home or even at the station when you're getting off and just shed that responsibility so that you really can come off the clock and be the person that you want to be, rather than half the responder or still ruminating about experiences at work or problems at work. So that was the motivating piece for that.
Yeah. And first of all, thank you for putting it out there and being open to come on and talk about it today. And kindly, Josh is going to let me release it as part of this podcast episode. So if you stay tuned through till the end of our convo, you will be able to hear it, which I'm very excited about. But equally, he puts out content on the socials all the time under Foundation Fortified on Facebook and Instagram. So you can equally find it on there. You can save it to your little saved things, whatever. Or you can even save this podcast episode so you've got access to it. Is it up on your website as well?
I haven't put it on the website as well, like I was telling you. So, I finally built out a studio. Recording meditation is just, I love it. I mean, I do love it, but let me tell you, it's challenging. Okay, the house settles. Okay,
yes,
and when you're doing anything else, you can kind of not be bothered by little noises here and there sometimes, but when you're diligently asking somebody to deeply focus and remain undistracted for this given amount of time, to have
kids
some
are kicking the footy out the side.
It just ruins the whole thing to have a cat meow in the other room. So I finally built out a recording studio out of my house, and it's going really well. And the only downside to the whole project has been realizing that I have to go redo all my audio so that I can give my my contemplatives the best experience they can have on my platform. So I am re-recording all of my stuff. But if you go to foundationfortified.org, you'll find that the quality of everything on the free side and almost half the stuff on the subscriber side now has been redone, repurposed, and rebuilt up with a better audio, because it is just important to me to put out quality product, regardless of whether or not it was old material, quote, old material or new. I don't want to be different halfway through. So I'm just re-recording everything to make it sound good. And
I think it's so lovely that you're that diligent, but I also think you are your own worst critic, because I don't think there was anything wrong with any of the other stuff. But I do understand the desire to, have it be exactly how you want it to be. So that does make sense to me. I was going to say, I didn't want to interrupt, while you were explaining it, but how you were something about, when they're either being a responder or being a husband or a father or something like that at home. And then immediately in my head, you were I think you said something about my husband. I'm he's kind of just dickish. But it's fine. I'll say it to his face. It's okay. He's used to it. That's all right. It's how we roll. But so I would also really love to hear too, because we mentioned it at the top of the show that when we connected last year, had you either just started with the Thin Line Rock Station or maybe it was in the works?
Yeah, I was brand new. So, I mean, I had maybe been doing the Thin Line Rock Station for 3 months when you and I started getting pretty familiar with each other. And I don't think
creepy,
it was,
but okay.
Yeah, that sounds a little strange. When we were getting
Sorry,
more
I had to say
family. Yeah, but we started communicating more and more. I think you asked me about the Thin Line. I said, "This is look, nice branding right there."
Exactly.
Everybody at home.
See how I did that? Yeah.
But yeah, I think you were asking me more about my craft, and I was still learning it, so I wasn't really sure. But I knew you'd be a great fit just because. You are so bubbly and you are so kind, and you just know, and you just live first responders, and you just want to be around more cops and around more firefighters, and you just care about the people who care for others. So I knew it'd be a great fit, and it was just so obvious. So.
You did just make me sound a little bit like a badge bunny, but I'm gonna forgive you because it was the best of intentions.
Yeah, but you sounded like the best badge bunny.
I do like to excel at these things. Sorry. She was there. I had to do it. So essentially, you guys are basically just overhearing like a conversation that Josh and I would have, like, you know, offline. Welcome to the shit show, as I like to say. Although, if people have been tuning into the Thin Line Rock Station, Josh and I jumped on last Christmas, and we did a bit of a joint show, which we are hoping to make a bit of a Christmas Day tradition on the Thin Line Rock Station. I may or may not have mentioned that to our boss the other day.
Oh, you did?
It was like, I just happened to be talking to him and was like, Josh is gonna like send you an email, but essentially we're just telling you that this is what's gonna happen. And he was like, all right. He just laughed. So cool. I don't know if he was laughing with me or at me, but I choose to.
I think it's fun. I think it's a great time. The
positive one.
I had a great time. I think this year we'll have better equipment, so it'll go smoother for everybody. Last year I was stuck in my closet, struggling for audio space. So this year we're getting better. We're getting better as we move forward.
We got there in the end. So it was fine. It was fine. But I think as well, given the opportunity and I always like to refer to it as a privilege. Like it's a privilege to be granted access to an audience like that is typically, current, former first responders, whether they're on duty, off duty, all that kind of thing. And I guess I wonder what your experience is, because you've been doing it longer and I do 2 shows a week, and it's not impacted the way I do my podcast, but I guess it probably has in a little bit, because a lot of the things, so I have to come up with something to talk about twice a week for 2 hours each of those times. And it's great because it makes my mind tick over constantly. But I guess probably things that I would probably maybe want to jump on and do for a mindfulness Mondays episode, I kind of just end up doing that twice a week on the radio show, which I just kind of think I'm really fortunate to be able to do and really happy about that. How does it impact having to kind of think of content for the radio show in terms of, and then how does that reflect back with your mindfulness meditation, either practice or output and all that kind of thing?
It's a good question. So as we were talking about earlier, I'm now back in the saddle as a first responder, I'm running the calls on a very regular basis. A third of my days are spent away from my family at a firehouse now, running on medical calls. And that has just made, content creation 10 times easier, and it's not that I'm, actively taking snapshots. It's just I'll make a mistake, or someone else in my environment will make a mistake, or a situation will arise within my day as a first responder where a little bit more mindfulness applied here in this direction or that direction would have added to the situation, or everyone would have benefited from the situation, right? Or I just try to notice when I make, like I said earlier, when I make a mistake and I reflect back on what I could have done better in this interaction with the coworker. It just makes it all the easier to consider how other first responders are meeting these same challenges, and I'm always trying to look through my life through a little bit more of a mindful perspective. So it does make it a lot easier being in the environment around police officers again, around fire captains, around paramedics, talking to dispatchers. It makes it so much easier to think mindfully about the struggles of the job and what we all want out of our lives, and having conversations and finding out what people could subtly use from Foundation Fortified. So it's just made it that much easier for me personally. So
no, that's awesome. And I think you and I are sort of pretty similar. I won't show you my office because it's pretty messy, but I literally carry and I'm old school. Most people would just write notes on their phone, but it's I have cue cards everywhere I go. And it started off just having them for study and all that kind of thing, and now it's it could just be a word. And even the compassion show that I did last week, it was just, I can't even remember where it came from. I do remember it was a live that my friends at Battalion 1 Consultants did, and I jumped on and was watching and supporting their work. And someone said something about compassion, or I might have even asked or posted a question about compassion, and then they started talking about it, and then it just like generated that little spark. So I think that's what's fun, because I think you and I are both in different ways, but we're both creative in the way that we like to write. And we like to think deeply and contemplatively about things. And so being able to, I think, share some of that with the listeners on the Thin Line Rock Station, we're trying to, we do try to keep it light and funny and all that kind of thing. I think we try to strike that balance. But I will, always be eternally grateful to you, because that is honestly some of like the funnest things I get to do during my week, is to jump on and do that show, and none of that would have happened without you. So
no worry. Hopefully it's one of those things that, in the long course of time, the Thin Line Rock Station is just a small bump in the road of what we've been able to do for each other. So,
this is true. This is true. And we were just kind of talking about it on offline, that there's many different ways to listen to us. If you haven't heard about it before, the Thin Line Rock Station, they have their own app. You can listen on their website. There's multiple like ways to be able to access it via their website. They're on the socials under the Thin Line Rock Station, and we just this week, I want to say, now can be found on iHeartRadio. Which is we were like pretty excited.
I'm pretty excited, I don't, it's not going to change anything I'm doing, but
No, but I think just being accessible to, like a broader range of people, or, I was just saying on Thursday, I bumped into some Somerville police officers and gave them our card and all that kind of thing. So it's just ways for people to be able to find us, because Josh and I are just two of the, I find really struggle to call myself a DJ, but two of the hosts, DJs / whatever, that are on there. But there's so many different people either like talking about different things and all that kind of thing, that I think there's something on there for everyone.
No, I agree. Get them having achieved the iHeartRadio just kind of feels like, it feels like the same kind of feeling of when your fire chief or assistant chief or police chief accomplishes something big for the department. It just feels like that. Yeah. All right. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to affect how you operate within your crew or how you do your job with the community, but it just feels good to see what you're, we all like to know that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And when you start to see it doing something bigger than you, you get that feeling,
Exactly.
and it kind of feels like the Thin Line Rock Station is something bigger than me. And so when things happen, with Foundation Fortified, I have to move all the chess pieces, right? And when you're part of something larger than yourself, we all know what it feels like for that organization to move in a direction that we don't like. But boy, does it feel great when we're part of something bigger than ourselves, when it's moving towards something that we do enjoy, and we didn't have to do much to have that happen,
No.
So that's
show up a couple of times a week.
Show up and
have some fun.
So that's great.
Well, and it's also like you're saying, it's like you and I, very, very tiny components, but there's a lot of work, a lot of time and effort and work goes on the back end of those kinds of operations, I would almost call it. And, our bosses work really, really hard to make sure that they're putting out great content and a great product and a great, not even a product, like a great service for the first responder community. So it's a kind of, I think I just look at it like it's a win, and it's a win for like the good guys. It's a win for people who are just trying to do something good for that first responder, emergency services, veteran community. That's just like playing great music and, having people on every now and then just to have a bit of a chat. And,
Well, it's just such a dumbly obvious good idea, is to develop a radio station where you promote every unit that's on duty should be tuned into this thing all the time. So like every fire truck, every ambulance, every police truck across the nation. It's just like such an obvious way to get yourself an audience, So that's what I've started to do in my ambulance. I try to throw my phone on and I just try to play it. Now my ambulance is old, so it doesn't connect to but I can still get my phone to connect.
You're like, I'm going to bring my portable speaker and do all of the things. No, and I think it's great. They play lots of like first responder like commercials in terms of, you know,
Mhm.
first responder companies and or like first responder run or owned companies and businesses and all that kind of thing. So I think it's nice just to be affiliated with a group of people that just putting out something good. There's nothing about it is tarnished by a lot of, I guess, how do I say it? A lot of the external shit. Like
Mhm.
that, it's
Mhm.
not political. It's not, you know, like it's not that. There's nothing, you know, and there's a lot of tragedy in what we do. Well, not me anymore, what you do. And there's a lot of, you know, controversy. There's 10-second video clips that go viral that then these people are castigated and then the truth comes out. But so I think part of the thing I love the most about it is like I think even though you and I can talk about, you know, sometimes some kind of heavy content and topics, it's always first responder related. But I think from, you know, having conversations with our boss, like the desire behind it is to kind of offer a refuge or a place to escape, or that is almost just like uniquely belongs to them. And I know you and I have talked about like when we did the Christmas show and all that kind of thing, like we wanted to spread a sense of camaraderie because, like, you know, I know you know what it's like to work a Christmas shift. I know what it's like to work a Christmas shift. We wanted to, I guess, be there with
Mhm.
those people
Mhm.
and hopefully, you know, get to do it again this year. And
No,
as long
I'm excited.
as
Yeah.
as long as they'll have us, I don't know.
I remember we played a couple games. I
I
had
was
you try
just
to
about
like.
to say you're going to have to like, or I'm going to have to practice because I was terrible at those games. Oh my God. Embarrassing.
We'll do something else. We'll figure it out. But it was a lot of fun. We'll do every Christmas. I think it's a great tradition. I'm going to keep that up.
Exactly. I know we'll
So
have to start planning it soon.
have little decorations behind us. You know,
I know.
decorate our
I'll
spaces.
have to like my children's pictures can't go anywhere, but maybe I'll find some tinsel or something like that and put it up. I think I was gonna do a headband, but then I'm like, oh, then it's gonna like ruin the earphones. So
Oh yeah, the
we'll come up
headphones.
with something. You did have a great ugly sweater last time, so
Thank you. I was proud of it. I was proud of it.
not sure if pride should be the overarching one there, but you do you, mate. And I think one of the other things that we wanted to address too, which was I think something that maybe it was like an offline conversation we were having. I'm not quite sure what sparked it, but it was kind of the phrase of like when people say that they're quote unquote working on themselves or I'm working on myself or something like that. I feel like there was sort of something that you wanted to just kind of like have a bit of a chat about in regards to that.
Well, yeah, you know, so I'm always kind of thinking out loud to, you know, my wife, the wall, the dog, whoever's listening, whoever's listening, I'm thinking out loud to. And I've just heard people in my environment over the last week or two on a very regular basis say, well, I've been working on that with myself, or I'm working on myself in that context or that domain, or I'm working on myself. And it's a phrase I hear very regularly, and I just have no
Mm-hmm.
idea what people mean when they say it. You know, I feel like it's a cop out phrase in a lot of ways. You know, no one who's working on themselves or improving themselves needs to talk about it that often or reference it. And you know, what does it mean to work on? What is it? An activity that one has to do? Is it a therapist one has to go see? Or you know, in my world, working on yourself is noticing right now that you've become overclouded with anger, or right now that you've become, you know, shadowed by frustration, or in this next moment now you are a little bit impatient. So, you know, those are all negative emotions, but you could do it the other way too, you know, noticing right
Mm-hmm.
now that there's something to be happy for. You know,
Yeah.
noticing right now that okay, maybe it's a little warm in this room, but I'm enjoying talking with my friend and talking to a great audience. And it's like, I'll sit in this warm room for the rest of my life because of all these other great things that are happening. Right. But
Yeah.
we as people, we get so dogmatically focused on the one thing in our environment
that's
that
wrong
needs
or
to be
something.
commented on or
Yeah.
needs to be, fixed, instead of just realizing that the other 90% of the room, 95% of the room is everything you could possibly want. So I'm curious what you think it means when somebody says they're working on themselves, or if that's
Yeah.
just a cop out for, like, to me,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. So I see where you're coming from very much in terms of like it can easily sound like a bit of a cop out, because I think anyone who is on any kind of social media, and it wouldn't even have to be that, just the internet in general these days, I think there's a lot of like pop culture, but that kind of pop psychology culture of like, everyone's being traumatized, everyone's a narcissist, everyone's being gaslit. Like, I think there's a lot of psychological terminology that is now in our everyday speech, right? Or like the zeitgeist, and people use the terms, and I think some things are definitely overused. So I think that can be one of them, like someone saying, oh, I'm just like working on myself or whatever else. But I look at it like because I am, your elder statesman. What am I, 5? I think I'm 5 years older than you.
Maybe.
There have been times in my life where I have actively, quote unquote, like worked on myself, and when I look at it like working on myself, I think it's you're reconciling aspects of your life. So I know for me, get real, like raw and honest with you, that I had like a challenging time sort of in my late 20s after the breakdown of a long-term relationship, and I sort of not went off the rails, but I guess was probably trying to find every other way to cope or get over it, or what do they say? The best way to get over someone is to get underneath someone else. That old chestnut.
That old chestnut.
Yeah. So, but I reached a point where it was like, this isn't serving me anymore, and I'm not fulfilled by this, and it's actually kind of making me feel worse. And that's not to say that's the only aspect, but I think that can translate to anyone who sort of reaches a point where they kind of go, okay, like whatever strategy I'm using or whatever practice I'm engaging in my life, whether it could be drinking, it could be some kind of behavior, whatever it is, I think you kind of reach a point where it's not serving you anymore. And you take like an intentional moment to, I look at it like you sit in it. You sit in that recognition, and I think just kind of try to look at yourself with a very raw lens and be really honest and go, and I don't know, maybe wrestle with the things that you don't really want to wrestle with, or you don't really want to look at.
I think you're saying exactly what I want to imply is it takes activity to do so.
Effort.
So many people want to, improve themselves at the same rate that they want to eventually lose 20 pounds. It's not going to happen until you do something about it. There's got to be some sort of activating, motivating behavior that is going to influence some sort of change. You can't be comfortable and change. You can't. And what's more is, as well as I do in my mindfulness, impermanence is just all around us anyway. We all talk about change, and that brings a negative tinting of our experience. We don't like things to change. But if we just realize that things all around us are just by their very nature impermanent, well, that's an easier pill to swallow, right? My boys living in my roof is an impermanent situation, right? Some days I love that fact, and other days I dread it. My career as a firefighter and a fire captain was an impermanent situation. My healthy knee was an impermanent situation. All those were also changes, but there was nothing I was going to be able to do to influence that change, and there's nothing I was going to be able to do to see it coming. And
Mm-hmm.
our bodies are impermanent, our lives are impermanent, and what causes us suffering isn't that things change, it's that we want them to stay the same,
Yeah.
but they can't. So I feel like in a lot of ways, if you're going to work on yourself, you have to realize that we're always in a state of impermanence. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you have to act in order, you have to be a little bit uncomfortable if
Yeah.
you want to change anything in your life, whether that's your physical body, whether that's your financial situation, whether that's your mind. There's got
Yeah.
to be some level of discomfort in order to get any benefit. And I feel like so many individuals believe that they're acting in ways that are improving themselves, but really
Mm-hmm.
they're just responding to the outside world.
Yeah.
They're just responding and reacting to whatever the world is giving it at any given time, rather
Mm-hmm.
than creating conditions and structures like therapy or mindfulness or a hobby that will build some sort of resilience in you, some sort of challenge struggle.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be doing something active in order to create positive changes for yourself for the most part. If there are examples of ways where you can do that from bed, I would love to know. I would love to. I would love to know.
I could probably share one. But it's I actually wasn't meaning it that daintily, but that's okay.
Oh well, that's what I heard.
I know, and this is why we're friends. But as well, to like sort of add on to what you were saying, it's like you're saying change gets a bad rap because as humans we like to stay comfortable. And that's why because to change, then we are entering into the unknown. And then that brings about fear and out of our comfort zone and all that kind of thing. But then if you don't propel yourself forward in that sense, like you might be missing out on something great.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say, get your mind out of the gutter for a second. It was more the fact of like, I'm trying to remember the term I used. It was like a mancation or oh God, it's going to really bug me now. I'll have to text it to you when I remember it. But like,
Okay.
I just kind of went like cold turkey and I'm like, I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to like interact with anyone, whatever else. And I just kind of literally put blinkers on and it was wintertime. So that helped.
Yeah.
And I didn't go out. I didn't go like out socializing. Like if I did something, I went to a friend's house or I had friends over at I literally just did not want to put myself in a position where I was going to meet someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like as in actively, I was mid to late 20s. So it was like, you'd go out to bars or clubs or whatever and meet people like that. And I purposefully didn't put myself in any of those kinds of situations because I wanted to quote unquote work with myself. And realistically, it was about reconciling things from the past. It was looking at, parts of myself maybe that I didn't like. It was recognizing like how some of my own actions had contributed to things along the way. And I look at it like, maybe if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been in a place or like emotionally ready that when I met my husband, I might not have healed enough from stuff in the past to actually be able to go, oh yeah, I can upend my whole life and move across the other side of the world and marry this guy. And 11 years and 2 kids later, like it's worked out. But if I sort of probably hadn't taken that time to reconcile things. And I also think, like you're saying, it's that the impermanence, like everything is changing, whether we like it or not.
Or
So
notice
I think,
it or not.
yeah. So I think it's like if you're not open and willing to change, or I look at it like is it changing or is it improving on everything that's come before or everything you've already built on? Because do you just want to stay where you are? Like, it's like firefighters, you become a firefighter, then you become a lieutenant and then a captain and a this and a that, or like whatever rank structure or whatever first responder domain you find yourself in. Like people are always seeking excellence, right? And so why does that not apply to ourselves. And I did work on myself in my late 20s. I worked on myself and learnt self-compassion as a mum of 2 young kids. I worked through a lot of like other bits and pieces sort of towards like the like my sort of late 30s, things that came up from my previous policing career that had no idea was still sort of like under the surface for me. And it was a process. It was going back and taking the time to really delve into the nitty gritty. So, and coming out the other side and going, oh my God, I feel so much lighter. And I didn't realize I was carrying this weight around for like the last decade.
I see. Yeah.
And I had no idea. And yet, if I hadn't done that quote unquote work, and it's going to look different for everyone, but I just kind of think I really strongly believe in being honest and being authentic and looking at ourselves with a very raw lens, because I just think we deserve it. We deserve not to hide from our own bullshit, because once you process it and you like release it, then you're good.
Yeah, you said something earlier, it was a little off topic a moment ago,
Like
but you
in
said,
my diatribe.
you said everyone's always striving for excellence, and I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a completely wasted project, and it's a waste of one's time. You know, what you should seek is to have a very fulfilling ordinary life, a very fulfilling ordinary experience, and find a simple joy in that. I mean, there's nothing extra about being a firefighter, police officer, or being an ambulance worker or a dispatcher. You know, there's nothing intrinsic. You know, very few of us are going to stand at the top of mankind with all the money and fame and power and resource. You know what I mean? Like, very few of us are going to climb that. And you know, I'm constantly, and this is going to sound pretty depraved, but you know, one of the things that I find so interesting is how often we pass by large cemeteries in our communities. You know, and I will probably, if I'm being honest with the audience, not go visit my great grandpa's gravesite, like, ever. You know, I wouldn't even know where it is. And it just doesn't take very long before your legacy, your excellent legacy that you're spending all of your extra overtime going to the department so you can make some name for yourself, or, you know, do some amazing, crazy excursion that's going to. We all spend so much of our time and resources dedicated to trying to build some excellent legacy that at the end of the day, you know, a very ordinary father and a very ordinary husband and a very ordinary fire captain can do very extraordinary things if you're present where you are. And the problem with excellence, and the idea of excellence as it's taught in our culture, is that you have to abandon everything ordinary to get there. And I just think that's a backwards way of seeing the world, especially this side of 30 years old, where I'm relatively sure that very little is going to happen in my world that's going to, you know, project me above the rest of the people. And you know what I mean? Why would I want that anyway? You're alone there anyway. You know what I mean? There's no one to celebrate with if you abandon all of your ordinary joy and happiness that you have to get it, if that makes sense. So
no, that does make sense. I think there is something to be, but how do I want to say it? I think there is something extraordinary in the ordinary if it's the life
I would
that you're.
completely agree with that statement.
Well, there you go. All right, end podcast. I think there's something extraordinary in the ordinary if you, like we've kind of been talking on and off, if you feel fulfilled, if you have purpose, and granted it's not everyone's desire, but if you are loved and you are able to love well or be loved well, I think that those are common, ordinary human experiences. But I think, especially in the first responder realm, I think a lot of us are robbed of, like you're saying, the ordinary because of sometimes our roles and the extenuating circumstances and the impact of shift work and trauma exposure and all of the different things. So I think being able to find the extraordinary in the ordinary, but live a good life in those sense, I think that makes you rich
Yeah.
and powerful. And I my husband always like jokes with me, and it's going to sound mean, but it's actually not. But he says, I love the fact that you come from nothing, because you appreciate everything. You appreciate the little things, like I will appreciate some small token or some small amount of effort that he makes, because I have that perspective of not growing up with a lot, so that you did really appreciate the small things in life.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's great that your husband gives you confidence like that about your fundamental, you know what I mean? Like, honestly, like it's nice to be seen like that by another person, that knows you deeply and well enough to not only explain who you are, but also how you get there, how you got there to
Yeah.
yourself in a way that's like, oh, I didn't even realize that about myself. Thank you.
No,
you know?
and I didn't.
So.
And he was probably giving me shit about something at that time. But again, it's I think I don't know if I've spoken about it before, and I don't know if you and your wife are the same, but one of the things I never even really thought much about when it came to wanting a partner to spend your life with was how important humor was going to be. And I know your partner is a nurse, and obviously you being a firefighter paramedic, I don't know if you guys delve into that realm of the kind of dark, humid sort of stuff. I know my husband and I definitely do. And, we were just like laughing something stupid last night. And, but I never thought how important it would be to have someone who makes me laugh, or how I enjoy that sense of humor that we share. And ours is a little more on the darker side. And we definitely joke about things that people, we call them like the normies, would be like, what's wrong with them? But I wonder if that's like, you and Sean's experience too, because it's a very underrated thing, because I think humor will outlast attractiveness, or any of the things as we get into our old age, which I think we both hope to with our wonderful spouses. But I think it's something that I never understood the value of until I had it, and it's just the best.
Yeah. No, I think humor plays a huge role in my marriage as well. I'm a huge smart ass. Like when you get me riffing, I'm just a total smart ass. It's like
This
it's
is brand
just
new
like my
information to me,
version.
Josh.
As far as dark humor and stuff, I try to leave that at home just a little bit, because when I was deep into my career at Eloy Fire, I was bringing that dark humor home, and that dark humor all of a sudden began to. It did funny, subtle thing. The more I invest in dark humor, the more I would find myself not understanding whether or not this joke was appropriate for a 13-year-old. Because I was just constantly telling them, right? I would find myself like not understanding whether or not this next thing I'm going to say, or I would just pay the immediate social price. I would make the damn joke, and then I'd get hit by my mom because I just said something in front of my kid. You know what I mean? So I just pay that social price. So I definitely try to keep the dark humor. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no getting away from it. It's just part of who I am as well. I've seen a lot of things are a little bit easier to swallow when you apply a little bit of sarcasm or a little bit of a veil of humor to it. But it doesn't mean my kids need to hear it. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean my wife and I can definitely get going about something in the privacy of our bedrooms. But even then, she's a school nurse, and she doesn't have to have the mind of me, and if anything, I wouldn't want her to. Why would I want to? You and your husband are both first responders. You both have driven your experiences for, and I definitely open up to my wife when I'm struggling, but I don't want to taint her worldview of the world
Yeah.
either in a way that, makes her a little bit more nervous to have her kids walk around their
Yeah.
hometown. Why would I want to do that to her?
Yeah.
So there,
Yeah.
there are little things I try to be perceptive of, but it doesn't mean I'm perfect all the time, every
No.
time. So
Yeah. No. Well, she's probably better than both of us combined. So, if you do need to share an offensive joke, you have my number.
I know who
You
to
can
call.
always call me. I know. And again, this is why we're friends. I'll just be like, when I finally have the opportunity to meet Sean, I'm just going to like high five her. She'll be like, you're it. You're it. You can listen to all of his bullshit. All right. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the audience? Do you want to kind of cover off just like maybe a quick summary of what doff the clock is before, because towards the end of the podcast I'm gonna add it in.
Yeah, so this is just if you've never tried meditation before, and you don't know what the project is. What I'm trying to do is remove any religiosity or strangeness that might be associated with different versions of mindfulness meditation practitioners out there, and then I try to apply our day-to-day struggles as first responders to the basic practice of studying one's own mind. That's how I see meditation, is just studying your own mind. And doff the clock is just like we were saying earlier, I think it just coming off duty and struggling to reintegrate when you're just going to go back to work tomorrow, or you had some terrible experience, or just the hyper vigilance that we all know what that feels like when we're at the station. No matter how hard I can relax at the station, it's a tenth of how I can relax with my my son in one arm and my other son in the other arm at home on the couch. There's to call one relaxing and the other relaxing is to like lie about the term. Like I'm not using it honestly in one context here. And so like doff the clock is just a mindfulness meditation designed to help you achieve that, actually leaving the uniform behind and leaving the role behind in the locker as well, as opposed to just changing clothes, but being the same hypervigilant, anxious primate running around your city trying to save everybody. So that's kind of what I designed it to do, is just get the first responder off the clock and be able to reintegrate into their personal life faster with a little bit more clarity of mind. So.
Yeah. No, and thank you for that brief description. And I think that's why it spoke to me a lot too when I first listened to it. I was like, dude, because so a very common thing that a lot of coaches, counselors, psychologists will help first responder clients deal with is that transition. And there's, lots of people talk about it in the mental health and wellness sort of field, but it's like you're saying, part of the process can be like making sure that you don't, you take that uniform off before you go home. You maybe stop and grab a coffee on the way home if you're a firefighter and you're finishing at, 7:00 in the morning or something like that. Having those kind of decompression practices, blasting a podcast or a song or something like that on your drive home, like these are all minor physical, but you're also, I think, offering people that kind of psychological decompression and switch over from that work persona to that home life persona, which I think is something that's really important and really valuable, because I do think a lot of us struggle. And then when we don't know how to do it accurately, that's when, like you're saying, it does spill into our personal life and come home and be a bit of a dick to our partner or snap at the kids and all that kind of thing. And you're not wanting to act like that.
No.
And they're not wanting to exist on eggshells around you as a result. So I think it's such a lovely resource for you to share, because I think it's a practice that, like we're saying, people can hook it up to their Bluetooth in their car and they can listen to it while they drive home from their station. or, sit in their car before they take off and just have that sort of decompression. So thank you for putting it out there and being open to come on here and have it as the little spark /
as
excuse.
the excuse to get together with each other. Absolutely.
Exactly. No,
and I'll be putting more and more out now that I'm
Yeah.
on a regular schedule. I'm really hoping to try to put more meditations out as much as I can along with the rest of my content. But what I am is a meditation teacher, and I built Foundation Fortified and then had to kind of get busy again trying to reintegrate with a new career. And now I'm just ready to be a paramedic one day, father another day, and then just build my mindfulness meditation for first responders on the third, and just that's what I hope to do with the rest of my days here, so
yeah. No,
that's
awesome. And thank you for being willing to share it with the podcast audience. So if you guys will stay listening, you will hear Josh's doff the clock mindfulness meditation practice at the end of the podcast. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, thank you for your time today, Josh. Really, really appreciate it. It is, we meet people in our lives for various reasons, but you sort of came into my realm as, just another sort of random podcast guest. But I am fortunate that I make some lovely friendships and connections, and you have been a really important and impactful one in my life. So thank you for that.
Well, I care about you just as much, Erin. It's been nothing but a pleasure getting to know you more and more, and I know we got a lot of future work and collaborations to do together. So let's get on that ball. There you go, thin line.
I know. I can't help
I feel the same way. I'm very fortunate to have met you as well. So,
thank you, darling. All right, we'll wrap it up, and so all of our fine listeners can listen in. And if you are interested in hearing more, please follow Josh on the socials under Foundation Fortified and www.foundationfortified.org.
Correct.
I got it right.
Good work.
All right, guys, this has been another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a First Responder Mental Health podcast. I've been your host, Erin Jane. And as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.